All right, we're going to start digging into a new piece of furniture. So far we've kind of covered a little bit of the basics of drywall construction, kind of gone through that a little bit, gone through some 3D modeling practice tools in AutoCAD, and then also doing a small 3D model for a table as a favor for one of our guys here. So what we're going to be moving on to next is actually a print for Mercedes-Benz Goldwing Lobby. This is project 6438. It is drawing F1. And if you're logging your time to, well, actually, if you're in training, you wouldn't be logging your time to it. I'm logging my time to it since I'm drawing it, though. So there's our packet number there. And then we've got our print reference description and all that here. So elliptical table, level 1, Goldwing Lobby, or Goldwing Club, room 100. I'm going to move this over to drafting so we can begin working on this. Come on. There we go. All right. And then let's go ahead and start looking at our reference here and see what we've got. So it looks like page A-406 is where we want to start. So let's go find our project folder and start looking at that. Okay, so as we get into more complicated things like furniture, I'm going to also bring up the takeoff here just to kind of side by side take a look at that, make sure that we've included everything that we need to include as part of our scope. And also, at this point in time, if you're looking at picking up furniture for your list, what I would suggest also is making sure that we are paying close attention to the meeting notes folder. That's in the project folder. If you go to drawings, and there's a folder here called meeting notes. Meeting notes is going to hold a recording of the handoff meeting as well as notes that pertain to the scope of work on this project too. Now, because I've already gone through that, what I'm going to do is kind of walk you through what we talked about there. And first off, let's go ahead and look at our architectural for what we're about to get into here. So this one's a goofy looking table. It is ellipse or elliptical shaped, so it is kind of egg shaped in a way. Ellipses are very unique. They actually do not have one constant radius, which is kind of unusual. So as I was talking to Patrick about this one, they do have some radiuses called out, but we are really going to kind of not really pay too much mind to those because those radiuses that you're seeing there, although yes, it would be important to try to use them if they were relevant, but ellipses are actually a very unique shape in general where you're not able to actually use a constant radius. So what you actually do instead of using a radius on these types of drawings is you're going to use an overall width and an overall length, which will set the 2 points for the long side and the 2 points for the short side for your drawing here. So here we've kind of talked through this a little bit. We got a long side here at the base of the table at 79 inches and the short side at 36. Those dimensions actually is a little goofy. It's a little marked up here, but why that is because when you're looking at the base of this table, it's actually made out of a really unique material too, which is kind of cool. The base of this table is PL1. Normally PL would stand for plastic laminate, so you would go to your finish schedule, of course, and try to figure out what that is. So you can get sheet sizes and what that is, but on this specific project, PL1 actually is actual leather, and it's not just any regular leather, it's actually Stingray leather too, so it's kind of interesting. So the base of this table is going to be clad in Stingray leather, which is kind of cool. Go back to our drawing here. There we go. So we're going to keep that in mind as we go to draw this. That is something we got to kind of watch for. I did sketch in some framework here. you go back to the original millwork drawing from the original architectural, they kind of did a somewhat okay job of showing the framework, but really it's not 100% spot on. Like it's pretty close to what you would normally need, but what I did was I sketched in what this would look like in on-site standards here. So you can see, going back to what we talked about with drywall construction, that we do have a locator plate along the floor right here at the bottom. That's 3/4 thick by however wide it needs to be the width of your drywall there. Above that, you got your base plate or your bottom plate. That is the next layer up. Again, that's 3/4 thick, just like we talked about before in our drywall video. And we got our ribs, which sit right on top of that or right in between. And those are rabbited in that 1/4 inch, kind of like we looked at earlier. And you got your top plate up here, top plate being on top of the ribs. It's also 3/4 thick, and it's to lock in all the ribs and capture them so that way they don't move around or anything like that. And everything's locked in place just like a standard stud wall in a house. Outside of this, currently what I show is nailers here. You got a couple nailer blocks. They're usually going to be like 4 inches tall by 3/4 thick. We're going to also probably rabbet those into the ribs as well, but we'll get to that when we get to it here. And then, yeah, that's in the very middle of that too. You're going to see there is a small drywall there, which might look out of place. It's not really like a normal feature to have, but when you have a opening like this where you have drywall framing all the way around in a circular shape, sometimes you need additional support in the middle, and that's why they have that kind of drawn in right here. That's that middle drywall we just saw sitting right there in the middle. What that does is it beefs up the middle, so that way if any pressure or weight is placed in the middle of the table, it's not going to crack or bow. It's going to have some kind of rigidity to it. They're also showing their ribs at, like, I don't know exactly how big that is. I'm guessing that's probably like a 2x4 in drawing here. We're going to change that up to be something more typical for us. So we'll just kind of use that view as a reference, but really we're going to be revising that to show something that looks more in tune of what we're kind of expecting to see. Going back to those die walls, you can see that there are wire chase or plumbing chase holes cut into those. I just dropped those in as an example, but also we can show them here because there is going to be wiring going through this wall or into this island here. And then you have this little nifty top piece. So if we go back to the axial view they provided, you can see what that looks like. It's kind of just like a little serving station or a little bit of a just a raised center platform in the middle of the island here. So what we're going to do is we're going to frame that separately, kind of like what their section view shows. We have our countertop, which is going to run all the way through, and then I'm going to have this placed on top of that countertop, and we will frame this out as we need to make that work. All right. So let's take a look at anything else that looks like it might be out of the ordinary. We do have MT01 base, which is most likely going to be metal base in this case. I'm going to take a look at the finished materials to see what that is. Did it look right past it, or is it not in here? Oh, there it is right there. Duh. It's chem metal. Okay, so if you haven't seen chem metal before, what that is, it is a very thin gauge metal. I'll pull it up here so you can see it. And a lot of times in on-site lingo, we refer to it as ML for metal laminate because it's used just like a laminate sheet would be when you press that and glue that to your furniture or your panels here. So this is what the outside of that looks like. That's that Cleopatra aluminum 629 by Chem Metal. It's kind of like a gold feathered kind of look. There's an example picture of it used in an actual space. Kind of rustic, kind of nice looking. that's what's going to be used. Go back to the drawing here. That's just going to be used at the base of this here. You can see that's being called out right there. We were trying to figure this out during the handoff meeting, and I will take a look at my notes to make sure that we have a actual conclusion on this. But I think what we're going to do is we're going to make that chem metal go up and then wrap this little bumped out nose piece right here. We're going to try to do that. We'll see how it goes. It'll be kind of difficult because of the curve and everything that's happening here, but we're going to probably end up using that. Now, let's see. Paint underside of plywood to match stone. That's unique. Typically on an island, a desk, a table, the underside of your countertop will usually be primed black to make it less noticeable that that's what's, that it's a plywood subtop. In this case, they want it painted to match the stone, which is QSO2. Let's find QSO2 and see what that is. It's Corian Calicata Villa. So let's pull that up and I'll show you what that looks like. It's kind of a white beige color for that countertop. Kind of has like a little bit of a marbly look to it. So that'll be what our countertop will be on this island here. Let's see, what do they got in the middle? That's also MTO1, so that's that Cleopatra chem metal that's right there. So they kind of just flip-flop between two materials mainly, with the exception of the paint that's to match the stone underneath. So really there's not a lot of materials for this, which is kind of nice. So you got the chem metal, Cleopatra, the stingray leather wrap on the outside, the paint underneath the counter, and then the QSO2 stone tops for both the higher counter and the lower counter there. Okay, let's go back to some of the other things we talked about here during our handoff meeting. So one thing that we try to do, and I would keep this in the back of your head if you can remember this one. So anytime that we are supplying framing, for instance, if we're building a desk, a counter, an island, if we are providing the framing that sits below that island, desk, counter, whatever have you, we typically want to recess the in-wall steel brackets into the plywood subtop. So what that means is that right now what they currently show is the bracket is sitting below that counter. What you really want to do is have it sitting inside of it like this. We will have our CNC programmed to run the routes for those so that they sit right above where the ribs are going to be. And that way we can recess those in and we can hide those brackets a little better. There's another benefit to that as well. If you ever were cleating the panels on, Z-clipping the panels on or anything like that, usually you want to have a 3/4 inch lift off space here. Now, when you have a bracket arm that sticks out, that space then becomes 1.25 inches tall instead of 3/4. And the reason is the bracket arm itself is a 1/2 inch thick. So if you imagine as you're going around your island, if you had these brackets sticking out and you had these on cleats, you have to have enough clearance space for right below the steel. So that would be a 3/4 from bottom of steel to top of panel. But on the areas that don't have the steel, technically that would be 1.25 inch gap because the steel is a 1/2 inch thick. So it is kind of a weird trade-off for that. And usually when we build our own furniture, we do try to recess those brackets into the subtop here so that way we can alleviate that issue and kind of make it look more professional and a lot cleaner altogether. Let me try to think of any other comments we have here. All right, so I do have an email chain that refers to what this is. In the base of this island, they're requiring that we include a access panel, which in this case, we didn't have a lot of notes on it right now because we were still asking about it. So I was going to pull up the email from Patrick here so I could show you what the conclusion of that was, and then I can also get myself caught up on that too. So sometimes when you have a lot of things, like for instance, here we go. This is a lot of crazier furniture, more complicated furniture. You're going to have questions that go along with that. Now, if you have questions that either the lead drafter on the project or the project manager from our team is not able to answer, then what we're going to do is we're going to have the project manager use an RFI, which stands for Request for Information. They'll put a formal RFI out there, which they can send to the architect and the GC. And the architect and the GC will do their best to answer that question. Usually they don't take very long. Sometimes they do, but it depends on who's running the project, how busy they are, and what the priority level of the project is for them. So in this case, we did get an answer back though. So I'm going to go to the bottom of this email and just read through it for you here. So initially, let's see, we have a request here. I'm working on the shop drawings for Goldwing Lobby. Give some feedback on on-site questions below. Okay, so we have the oval shape has an access panel on its base. Is there only one access panel is in the approximate location, or are there two on either side? So one on each side of the island. Is there a specific location, or can we draw it roughly equivalent between the shortest radius and the longest? All right, so the second question down here that we're going to come back to, we would like to modify the oval shape of the table body between the base and the top so that we can minimize the amount of seams in the, this is the Stingray leather here, located under the smallest radii moment, middle of short side of the table laminate comes in 4x8 sheets. All right, so let's see what they are having for a response on that. And then there's one more question here. Could we get a finish call out for the top lip of the underside of the brim over the base of the oval table? So what that's referring to is right here in the red. It's not explicitly called out that this is going to be the MTO1 or the ML1 call for us. And so one thing that Patrick and I looked at earlier on as we were trying to figure that out, we wanted to be on the safe side, so we did put in a request to get that figured out. Now, let's scroll up a little bit in the email and see what we got for answers here. I'm sure that they've got answers right here in blue. Okay, so these blue ones here, let's go back to it. So it says, Donna, I reviewed your questions. Please see our answers below in blue. Let me know if you have any follow-up questions or need any other clarification. The oval table, okay, that's our question again. It's talking about the access panel, where it is, how many are needed, how to locate it. So they only need one access panel. It says to please locate it in the approximate location I'm showing below. You can place it in the exact spot that works for you as long as it's in the general area we're showing. Okay. Okay. So they only need one and they want it to be roughly where they show it. So we'll use that information to place that panel. Let's look at what's next. Number 2, this is in regards to the size of the table to make sure that like we were able to reduce the size of it to make the laminate have less joints in it, because we know the laminate comes in 4x8 sheets. And we wanted to make sure that we didn't end up with 3 or 4 joints in the panels below that table. So what Patrick did was he did the math to find the circumference of the ellipse. And it says here, it is an acceptable change if narrowing the body of the millwork. I'd also like to narrow the stone top by 1 inch all the way around the perimeter. Let's also show the narrow base and the metal base brim detailed by 2 inches. on all sides. That way it doesn't change too much. Okay. All right, and they have notes marking that up too, so that's helpful as well. All right. Next, it says regarding the trim, can you guys please do a thin, maybe 1/4 inch metal transition so the seam looks purposeful? Metal to match the base. Please include a section of it on your drawings. Thanks. Um, let's come back to that here. I just got to reread that again. The trim, can you guys please do a thin, maybe 1/4 inch metal transition so the seam looks purposeful? I may have to ask about that, but let me think through that again and see if I can find that here. Oh, that's talking about here in between the two panels. So where the panels butt together, we're going to be doing a 1/4 inch spline reveal, but we're going to finish it with the ML1 or the chem metal that we're using for the base. Okay, that makes sense. And that'll be a 1/4 inch wide reveal right there. All right. Could we get a finish call out for the top lip and the underside of the brim of the oval table? Again, that's talking about right here and under here. It says both of those should be metal to match the base. So that's kind of what I figured anyway. So that metal is going to be the ML1 or MTO1 material call that they use to use for that whole trim piece right there and the base trim below. Okay, so that helps and definitely worth us looking at here so that way we can get an idea of what it is that we're going to be building. So, all right, let's go ahead and also look at our takeoff. I did mention we were going to be looking at that here too. So contract pricing, let's go here and let me see if it's in the archive. Nope. Okay, it's this guy here. There we go. Here we go. This is our island right here. So reading the takeoff, I know we haven't looked at one for a little bit, but just kind of recapping a little bit of what's going on here because this is a little bit more complicated than a cabinet drawing or a panel drawing. What you're looking at here is anytime you see something that says desk framing straight or desk framing circular, that's referring to the die walls, the ribs, the base plate, bottom plate, or sorry, locator plate or top plate. That is a couple of line items that are placed in there to approve of or give pricing for those items that we have to build. You also have things like desk panel, flush P-lam self-edge. That'll be referring to the Stingray leather PL1 panels below the island. You also have this one here, which is the same thing, but for the curved panels. So they have a separate line item for curved panels there too. Same material. And then let's see what else we got. Table over oval subtop. So that's just the subtop that goes below the tabletop on here. We also got a couple line items that we need to pay attention to for hardwares. So we have Mocket's PS2C. Let me pull that up so you can see what that is. Okay, so the Mocket PS2C is just a wire grommet that goes into the countertop that allows the user to run cabling from the floor to the tabletop of the island here in this case. All right, then we got an access panel here, which we've already talked about. Got steel supports that go below our counter here. And then we got chem metal raised center, chem metal base. That's referring to the MTO1 or ML1 trim that we have going on and panels that we have going on our island. And then you have Corian Calicotta Villa, which is going to be your countertop material. And that last line item there is just a generic line item for parking for our install team and our project management team. So that's nothing to do with actually what we're dealing with here. So a couple things to take note of. We are responsible for the framing, so that's a good thing to note. We are responsible for the grommet which they gave us a spec number for that here, which is great. We do own the access panel and all paneling and solid surface material on this island. So we are pretty much building this thing turnkey. We just need to make note that this is all part of our scope. So nothing to remember to exclude or anything. That's all within our scope there. So, all right. Now, let's take a look at our architecturals one more time, and we'll pull up our AutoCAD file and start getting that set up to go. All right, I'm gonna open up AutoCAD on the side over here. There we go. There we go. We need to find our project here. So we're dealing with, we're dealing with Mercedes-Benz Goldwing Lobby today. We're gonna go to drawings, prelim project, and we need to go to DWT for our drafting template. So I gotta go back to that actually. My bad, one sec here. There we go. Okay, now let's go ahead and we can either fill out the title block or save as. Typically, I'll start filling out the title block first, and then I'll do my save as here for my drawing. So let's go pull up our drafting schedule, find the drawing that we're looking at here today, which will be this guy. It is F1 for Mercedes-Benz. We'll put in our initials here, put in our packet number. There we go, 46501. Our sub number, which in this case is different, it's 006. That's for furniture. So you'll see that a lot when you get into furniture here. All right, and then we need to paste in the description and location information for our island. So our table. There we go. Okay, so we've got that pasted in. All this other information is already filled out, and we'll fill out the page notes and the general notes at a later time. So for right now, let's change our tab to match our print reference here at F1.0. And we're going to hit Save As. And we're going to save this as a DWG to the prelim project folder for the Mercedes-Benz Goldwing Lobby project. Make sure that when you label it, you do label it correctly. So you're going to want to put your print reference, your packet number, your then your description, and then your version number. In this case, version 1.0. It's our first rendition of this print, so we're going to save it. All right, and then we can start digging into our drawing or model space. So when you're dealing with modeling, there's always going to be several different ways to go about making something in AutoCAD. Now, I will show you the most efficient way that I know to be able to build something like this in AutoCAD. If you find something more efficient or you want to share some thoughts or ideas that you have, go for it, because the more we learn about how to build these things in AutoCAD, the better we're all going to be as a group. So I'm going to show you how I would go about handling this. And again, if you have another idea or a better method of doing it, we'll talk through it some more. But yeah, so let's talk through how we're going to make this into a three-dimensional model. So the first thing that you're going to be able to do, I guess I want to copy something over here from the email chain that I have with Patrick. Here it is. I kind of want to copy this out and paste it into my architectural right here because this is important to me. It's changes that are being made via email, so they're not in the architecturals, and I want to make sure I don't forget about that. That's going to be uber important. So, all right, there we go. So let's start with what we know. Okay, so they decided they wanted to shrink the tabletop in 1 inch. So currently, what's drawn is a tabletop that's 4'10" on the short side. Trying to see if they give us the length on the long side. We have to do the math to figure this out. Oh, it's right here, right here at the bottom. I didn't see that. Okay, so long side is 10 feet or 120 inches currently. All right, short side is 4'10" or 58 inches currently. They are reducing that in 1 inch on each side all the way around. So what we're going to do is we're going to draw in a generic couple of construction lines to be able to start working through this. So let's start with the short side. So we know we're at 58 inches. That's 4'10", and we're taking off an inch for each side. So remove 2 inches from that, which will leave you with 56 inches on the short side. So let's go into where our 3D model is. I'm just going to kind of start sketching up here. So we are going to draw a line that's 56 inches long in this direction. Okay. And then the other side, we're at 120 inches for the length, but we need to bring that in an inch on each side again, just like we did before, meaning that would be 118 inches long then. So draw a line that's 118 going the other direction. Move that line so that it's facing, or the middle of that line is in the dead center of the vertical line we drew. And this is going to build the generic shape of the ellipse for your countertop at least. Okay, so to draw an ellipse, which you may or may not have covered yet, but ellipses are not that more difficult than a circle. The only difference is when you draw a circle, it asks you for a radius or a diameter. And in this case, for an ellipse, it's going to ask you for 2 radiuses or 2 diameters. And that's why we have these drawn in like we do here. So at the very top of your screen, you should see the circle command, but right below that should be the ellipse command. You can also type in ellipse on your keyboard and it will bring it up as well. So start with this. Click on the middle of where the 2 lines intersect. And you're going to drag a line over to here, the edge of your line for the long line, and then an edge or a line down to the edge of your short line. So that'll give you the shape of the ellipse for the tabletop. All right. So that's a good starting place at least. So we now have the perimeter of our tabletop. In the dead center, they didn't reduce that, did they? I'm looking to see. Nope, they did not reduce the little tabletop in the middle. So what we're going to do is we know that the short side of that tabletop in the middle is 1'8". All right, so 1'8" is 20 inches. And let's see if they give us a length on the long side. So 36 inches on the long side. So 20 on the short side, 36 on the long side. So we're going to also do the same thing we just did here. We're going to draw an ellipse from the dead center of our table here with a radius out here at 20 inches on the short side. And then again, long side here. Oh, I did that backwards. 1 sec. 20 inches on the short side, 36 inches on the long side like that. I don't know if that's, I don't think that's right. Hold on. Let me redo that here. I think I'm going based on the, yeah, I'm doing that incorrectly. I'm going based on the diameter, not the radius. I need to kind of redo that and fold it in half. So here, instead of 20, this would be 10. And this side, instead of 36, would be 18. Okay, so that makes a lot more sense. So now we got the taller tabletop in the middle, this guy. Or if you're looking at your axial view, it'd be this guy. Then we got the shorter tabletop that goes around the perimeter of the table right here. All right. Now, let's make sure that we've got everything we need to start working on the rest of this table. So really what I'm kind of doing is mapping out the areas that I'm building first. And then what I'm going to do is work on making the model after I've gotten the map on 2D, like in the 2D view. Okay. Sorry. So we are, let's see, where's my notes? So Patrick had suggested we reduce the overall width on the short side to 36. Now, based on the email chain response we got back from the architect, they were good with that. But they said if we're narrowing the body of the millwork, I'd also like to narrow the stone top by 1 inch all the way around. Let's also narrow the base and the metal trim detail by 2 inches on all sides as well. So it looks like, so the look doesn't change much. Okay. So really what they're trying to do is they're trying to match that base, bring that in the same distance that we're bringing in this. So we're reducing it in 2 inches on either side. So a grand total of 4 inches reduced from the outside. Okay. Let's see, how do we want to do that? So we're talking 36 inches this short side by 79 inches on the long side. So we're going to draw another ellipse here, starting with the center. And then it's going to ask you to specify an endpoint. So if we're going 36 for the short side, that would be 18 inches on the short side. And then the long side at 79 inches, take that, divide it by 2 to get a radius of 39.5 inches right there. Okay, so this line here, and we can even start color coding these if you'd like to. I'm kind of going to do that for my own sanity here. I'm going to color code the framing and the panels below as a yellow mustard color. The countertops I'm going to leave with that dark blue sort of geometry layer color. All right. All right. I'm trying to see my time here to see how we're doing. Oh, there we go, 37 minutes. That's not so bad. All right, we'll keep going. So now that we've got the plan view mapped out in a sort of a nutshell there, we're gonna have to add this into, which I guess we could do that right now. That's 5 inches in from the outside and 7 inches in from this side. So let's go ahead and draw that in. So one more ellipse here for that. So long side is 1 foot 10. Divide by 2 to get a radius of 11 inches. And then the short side was predicted to be 10 inches, which would actually be 5 inches for the radius. So the panel right here would be this line that we're showing here. We're going to make that yellow as well. Okay. Now that we've gotten all that, okay, what I would like to do is I want to leave this alone. So what I want to do is make a copy of this so that way I have it forever off to the side. That way, in case I mess something up here, I have a backup to get to where I was previously up here. So it's kind of a good idea to make yourself backups and things like this, especially when you get to more complicated furniture or stairs or anything like that. I am always saving up backups until I'm done with the drawing, and then I'll delete my backups if I don't need them anymore. All right, moving on though. Let's focus on the framing. So let's start with the framing below the counter. So let's erase anything that's not related to that. So that's our framing below the counter, or this guy right here. Okay, so one thing that we've already seen is that we are dealing with a laminate panel. Now, most cases, laminate panels will be 3/4 thick. And so we will make the assumption here that this will be a 3/4 thick panel that sits right here. Right now, this line that's here is representing this line here, so the outside face of that panel. And so we're going to bring that in 3/4 to get the back line of that panel here. So we're going to use offset 0.75. And we're going to make sure we bring our mouse in and not out, so inside that circle. All right. Now, let's also pay some attention to this. We've got a little piece that sticks out right there. That would be this here. I'm just trying to find a dimension on it, actually. So if I find a dimension on it, I can maybe work with that. Somebody's got to have one somewhere. Well, here, I don't see it right now. It shouldn't be more than like 1 inch to 3/4 sticking out of the island. So what I'm going to do is try to scale it to get a rough idea of what they're looking at building for that. Let me take a look at this. So it's 3/4 proud of the panel here. That's not a big deal. I figured that would be the case. So we're going to offset this 0.75 out. And I might make this a different color so I don't get it confused. That'll be my metal that sits below the panel right here. And maybe that's about all I really need for this for right now. We're going to get into modeling very soon. I'm just trying to use that as part of the next video for the second part. So I want to try to get as much 2D stuff drawn as I can before we get into that part of the drawing here. All right, so let's talk about what the next step is in the game plan here. So we've got our top-down view, aka these will end up being the paths that we're going to be using to most likely sweep a 2D profile around to generate a 3-dimensional object. So now that we have these 2D paths in our plan view, we need to draw our section view through our island. So section view through the island, not a big deal. We're going to be working through that a little bit at a time here. So what I want to do is kind of start by looking at what we do know here. Okay, so we've got our top-down view kind of drawn. If I copy that and rotate it like this, it should give me a good place where I can take construction lines off of this. And I'm making sure as I'm doing this that I'm snapping directly to those midpoints or quadrant snaps for that circle. See what I'm doing there? Snapping to those. Okay, and then I'm going to also make these the same colors that we're using in our plan view too, to make it easier to see what's happening. All right, so we got our outside perimeter of our countertop, which would be these 2 lines here. We got the outside perimeter of our higher countertop, which will be these 2 here. This will be the panels that sit here and here. That's those 2 yellow lines there. And then these 2 yellow lines on the outside are these lines here and here. So let's start by drawing a floor line across the bottom. All right, and we need to figure out how tall is our base. So right now they're showing it 6 inches tall to the bottom of that metal trim piece. So let's use the offset command and make this 6 inches high off the floor. Then we have a 3/4 inch trim piece that sits right above that. So we're going to offset 0.75 to raise that up like this. Okay, and then we have a couple other height dimensions to pay attention to. It looks like they have the next one set at 2'1 1/4, so that'd be 25 1/4 inches, 25.25. And then the next one would be your countertop apron, and that's appearing to be 2 inches tall. So 2 inches there. Then you got 4 inches for the next step up. Oops, hold on. something didn't work quite right there. So I'll set 4 inches there. And then 2 inches for the next apron. Okay. So currently it is kind of a mess right now, but we're going to work through and get it fixed up. So let's think about what we know. So this line, again, and this line are the panels below the counter. Otherwise, that'd be like I'm looking at a side view. I don't really have one of that side, but be looking at this panel and this panel here. So let's trim those lines so that way it makes more sense as to what we're looking at. Okay, so those are the panels right there and right there. We know that this trim piece sticks out 3/4 of an inch from the face of that panel. So what I need to do is draw a line straight down from that panel, draw a line straight down from that panel, and move these each out 0.75 or 3/4 of an inch in the opposite direction, so outside. Then I can trim these lines back to those 2 new lines we just built. So they're in there. Okay, and then you can see here that they want there to be a 2-inch setback between the front of that base bump out and the actual base trim. So we'll take a line straight down like we did here for the other piece, and we're going to move these in 2 inches now. All right. So that kind of is shaping the base of our island so far. All right. And then we know our countertop does stop at the outside here, so we can trim these lines back to there and there. That's our main countertop there. We got our taller countertop. It's going to be there to there. And we can trim these lines back to there, like this. And then we got these panels in the middle. And again, since we have this line and this line, we can just trim away at that until we get something that looks like what we're expecting it to look like here. This would be looking at the side from over here, so it kind of has more of a resemblance of what's happening here. Yeah, and once you're done with that, that's kind of going to be the canvas or the shape of the item that we're working on drawing here. Okay, at this point, I'm going to put everything on that geometry layer. And then we're going to start working through the internals of this. So again, just like our top-down view, I don't really need that anymore because we have our top-down view kind of like the same method of what we're doing. I'm going to make a copy of this off to the side, and then I'm going to work my way into the internals of this piece here. So let's see what the QSO2 material thickness is. A couple ways you can go about doing that is you can look in your material log for the project. So we're looking at project Mercedes-Benz Goldwing Lobby, which is 6438. So I'm going to go to the material log Airtable base. And I'm going to go to 6438 and see what thickness that material is for the countertop. QSO2, it looks like here it is. It's Calcutta Villa, which is available in sheets of 65 inches by 130 inches and in thicknesses of 2 centimeters thick. All right, so a little bit of throwback here to some past information that I want to recap on. 2 centimeter thick material. Usually you're going to see that when it comes to stone or solid surface or maybe even quartz. So 2 centimeter material is always going to be drawn at 3/4 thick. Now, if you see something that says 3 cm material, 3 cm material is different, and you're going to draw and model that at 1.25 thick. Now, I bring it up now because it's easy to forget, but two, when you're dealing with specialty furniture, you're not necessarily flying solo as much, but you are a little bit in a sense because you're not dealing with common blocks that are going to be like able to be used over and over again. Like when you're dealing with cabinets, you have a specific countertop block that you can use for cabinets, and that countertop block will do the math for you. So at this point in the game, it's always a good thing to kind of remind yourself, at 2 cm, I'm drawing something at 3/4 thick. At 3 cm, I'm drawing something at 1.25 thick. So just kind of keep those in mind. You might want to write them down. If you ever forget, you can either ask though, or in your cabinet parts, you actually can use the countertop block from your cabinet parts tool palette, and it will give you that information anyway. So I can drag and drop this into my CAD file here when it loads, if it loads, there it goes. And I can still change all the settings to match what I'm dealing with here. And it does tell me what that thickness is here, so it's kind of a nice reminder. But technically, if you were only doing this in 2D, you could kind of say I want an apron on both sides, and you could kind of tell it, okay, so I have that. I probably want to make this a full subtop because it's furniture, and I'm dealing with 2 centimeter thick material. So you can kind of use this block as a gauge to draw what you're working on, but definitely try to keep it in mind as far as like what material thicknesses are available and how you draw them as you draw them here at Onsite. So yeah, so that'll be kind of what we're going to be looking at eventually. Is we have a mitered apron at the front, a mitered apron at the back, and we also have a 3/4 inch thick plywood subtop that sits right below that solid surface top above there. So we're going to draw that in by hand. We're going to offset the countertop down 0.75. We're going to offset the apron at the front in 3/4, apron at the back in 3/4, and we're going to do that for this countertop as well because it's using the exact same material as what's happening below. And then one more thing we need is we need a full subtop that sits below that solid surface. So we need to offset that line 3/4 down one more time, just like this. All right, so now we have a fair amount of cleanup work to do. That's not a big deal. We're going to use the line tool and we're going to connect some dots. So typically you would want to miter a corner like this. Now, this one, we may end up not mitering it, but it depends on how things work out. The reason why I would say you may not end up mitering this one is because you're dealing with a curved surface. And so sometimes it can be difficult to actually be able to miter something like that. A curve to a curve does make things a little bit more difficult. So for now, let's assume it's mitered just to make things easier for this training practice. But I just wanted to bring that up so that way you're aware of it. It may be something to ask about in the future if you're working on a drawing that has a countertop with a curve. You may want to ask if a miter is really the best way to go to draw that. So here we go. Got all that figured out. Got everything trimmed. Got that nice little miter at the front, at the back, and same deal with the top counter there. Let's go back to our drawing. All right, so next up, I would say let's work our way down now at this point. So we've got the countertop, apron, apron, subtop, countertop, apron, apron, subtop here. We also have this little itty bitty framed box that sits in the middle. That framed box is going to have 3/4 inch thick walls that are covered in MTL1 or ML1 for us, which is metal laminate. That's that Cleopatra gold looking material. So we got that offset in 3/4, offset in 3/4. We're going to do the same thing here. Bring this in 3/4, bring this in 3/4, and then same here as well. 3/4 in, 3/4 in. It's going to be pretty repetitive for thickness of material in general. Most times things are mostly 3/4, but you do want to pay attention to that on drawings to make sure you're dealing with something that's actually what you want it to be. So let's see. We're getting very close to an hour, so I'm just debating whether or not to press forward or save for the next video here. But let's keep on moving and see what we can do. So going back to our die wall training. All right, maybe I'll pull up that document here so we can take a look at it again. So in our die wall training practice, we were talking about how to frame a wall and how we rabbet those ribs into the base plate and the top plate. So what I want to do is pull that up again so I could show you that while we're talking through this to make sure that everything here checks out and we're drawing it the way that we need to. So we're going to pull up the straight die wall training example, and we're going to kind of have that pulled up off to the side over here. So here we go. This is pretty much going to be commonly what we're going to be looking at for our die wall here. We're going to be dealing with one that has nailers on the outside because the inside is mostly open. We're still going to have a wire chase in there. One sec here, I got to respond back to this real quick. Oh, let's see, what's our submittal date for this stuff? The 18th. Sorry. Sometimes I get questions throughout these recordings, and I have to, some of them are more urgent than others, and that one is more one of the ones I want to be on top of. So sorry about that. But we're going to be talking about how to frame this now. So kind of flip-flopping between what we have now and what our shop drawing shows. We are going to be providing a locator plate and and a base plate. And the locator plate, although it's not dimensioned here, I would like to make an assumption that it is at least 4 inches wide. I think that's pretty much my feel-good minimum as far as those go. If we go 4 inches wide, that gives ample room to be able to bolt that down to the floor in the field. And so we can always go larger than 4, but I also want to keep in mind too that the wider you go with these, the more material you are going to be eating up as well. So kind of give or take a little bit. I know this document probably does have a minimum width here. Let's see if it's called out. It may not be. Typically, though, I would like to say usually you don't want to go less than 4 inches wide unless you can help it. Yeah, okay, so it's not necessarily called out, but we're going to roll with that. So 4 inches wide. We got our 3/4 inch thick locator plate below. We're going to copy that up and make a 3/4 inch base plate here. All right. And this is actually more in tune with what we're talking about here today. So we need to bring this in 3/4. bring that up. So we're going to have this little piece of plywood here. That's our toe kick plate that's built into the dye-wall. And then we need the toe ledge. And the toe ledge here is going to be a little different. It may be pretty close to what's shown here. Yeah, I mean, we can make that work. We could build that toe ledge out to be a part of this, but I think what we'll do is that toe ledge, we're going to stop it at the top of this block here. Okay, that kind of makes more sense a little bit. So we got our locator plate, which is this guy, our base plate, which is this guy, and that toe ledge, aka the second base plate, really is going to be kind of like that, is over there. And then what we can do is we can throw in those nailers here. Nailers are going to be 4 inches typical by 3/4 thick. So 3/4 thick by 4 inches tall. And you're going to want to butt those right to the back of your panel, just like this. All right. Now, in this example, they're showing 2. You can have more than 2 if you'd like to. I think what I'm going to do is start with 2 and then see if I want to add another one in the middle. I think what I'm going to do is just move one to the middle here, just to be on the safe side. I think it's going to look a little more sturdy if we have a few in place there. Now, by the time it gets to listing in the shop, that may vary. It may get removed, but I'm going to throw in another one in the middle just to have an extra little bit of support there. All right. Now, here comes the top plate and then the ribs. So top plate. Okay, actually, my bad. This little nailer has to come down 3/4 of an inch like this. And then the top plate is going to sit right above that. So let's start with putting that top plate here. We're going to start at this corner, and then we're going to make it the width of our ribs. So like there to there. And make sure that this is 3/4 thick too. All right, so 3/4, and right now it's overlapping the nailer all the way across. What it's going to end up being though is it's going to end up being it's going to sit above that nailer by 1/4 of an inch. So I need to actually bring this in and then have it stick over 1/4 inch. The reason for that, going back to our dye-wall training, is you do have this top and bottom plate with the dados in it, the 1/4 inch dados for the ribs. And so the rib is actually going to be sticking into this nailer 1/4 of an inch. And because of that, you want your top plate to actually sit right above the entirety of the ribs. So that top plate is going to stick over that nailer 1/4 of an inch as well. So it's a little bit confusing at first, but you'll get through it. I mean, it's really not too bad. Let's go ahead and draw in our ribs now. So we'll do a P line. And I'm going to go from this corner here. So that means that I'm routing in, actually, hold on a minute. Oh, yeah, we'll start there. We're routed 1/4 inch into these nailers. Going down to here. We're going to zigzag across down to here. And we're going to kind of trace out where these ribs are going to live. All right, now that I'm here, what I did was I traced this line, which is 1/4 inch, that into my nailers, and I traced it all the way around the perimeter of where my ribs are going. Now I did leave this open here. You can see that that's not highlighted. What I'm going to do is go to properties and say closed and hit yes. What that does is it makes this polyline closed, so there's no openings in it, but also now it's completely a border around where the rib is going to go. So a couple things I need to change. You can see here that the top plate is going to need that 1/4 inch dado, which I don't currently show. So currently what I need to do to make that happen is raise my rib up 0.25. I also need to lower my rib into the bottom plate or sorry, a quarter of an inch as well. So grab that grip and type 0.25 down there. Okay, and we are routed into the front nailers a quarter inch. So now that we're there, that means that this outline is the true outline of where my ribs are going to be. So next up we need to do is add in our wire chase or our plumbing chase. And these circles can be any diameter they absolutely need to be, but you just want to make sure that you have at least 1 inch minimum between that hole and the edge of your stud or the edge of your rib. So let's check to see how wide our ribs are right now. So from there to there, our ribs are 4 3/4. Okay, so 4 3/4, take off a couple inches. So that means that your your diameter for your wire chase can be a maximum of 2 3/4 diameter. So let's go into our circle command, go to center diameter, and we're going to go 2.75 like that. You can double check using DI, grabbing the quadrant and making sure that you're 1 inch from the edge and 1 inch from the edge. Now, of course, the circle that I have here is not where it's going to live forever. It's just kind of where I placed it for now. So what I ended up doing was I took the middle of that circle or the center of that circle and I placed it right at the top of that rib like this. Okay, so then that rib or that wire chase, what I'm going to do is draw a line from the dead center of the hole and go to the bottom here where I want that to stop. So stopping at the top of that toe kick. Okay, and then what I want to do from that is use my array path command, which may not have been used in a little bit. We did use it a little bit during cabinets, but again, what you're doing here is you're going to draw a line for your path. You're going to draw your circle, and then you're going to use this to equally space those circles along that path. When you use this command, you always want to make sure that your path is going from center of first object to center of end object. And you're going to want to make sure that you have this set to divide rather than measure for your type up here. Now what you can do is you can kind of evenly space these out a little better. So usually what I like to do is have 3, maybe 2 wire chase holes. 2 is probably the minimum I would go. I don't think I would go to 1, but what I can do now is I can explode the array and then erase the top one and the bottom one here, leaving myself with some ribs that have these nailers on the front, a top plate, a bottom plate, a locator plate, and then these little added pieces that we added here for the toe ledge and the toe kick plate for these guys when you have a zigzag like what we have here today. So that, although it does look a little messy right now because we got a lot of lines happening here, me actually kind of erase some of these because what we're going to end up doing is we're going to now take this and we are going to, oops, 1 sec, let me close that up. We're going to take these lines that we have here now. I'm going to highlight all of the stuff we have in this die wall, and I'm going to go over to properties. I'm going to go up to quick select up in the top right corner of properties, and I'm going to say, instead of multiple, I want to tell it I want to select all lines. And I want to say select all, not just equals some color. So we'll do that, hit OK. Delete any extra lines. Oop, okay, maybe I deleted something a little early here, but that's okay. We will add that back in. Whoopsies. All right, there we go. So now we've got all these as polylines or circles. There are no lines in here. You can verify by going to your properties and checking. It's just circles and polylines, which is exactly what we want to see. And I can mirror this using the mirror command, and I'll just go ahead and paste this over here. So we've essentially drawn the 2 outside perimeter die walls of our table. We are going to have one in the middle here too, which will just be a standard basic die wall. If you really wanted to, you could use your block to do that. Going into your tool palettes, there is a section for die walls, which we haven't really covered yet. But if you go there, you can see that there is a vertical section through the die wall and a horizontal section through the die wall that you can use to help you draw die walls on your prints. When you're dealing with one that's in the middle like this, you won't actually need any nailers or cleats because there's no panels attached to this. Going back down to my top-down view, you can see that's just kind of there for support. There's no finished panels, no nothing on it, it's just standard plywood, so easy peasy. If we want to use one of these blocks for that, we absolutely can. I would suggest using the one that says blank and blank because that means it's not going to have any outside pieces, just the top plate, bottom plate, and locator plate, and the ribs. So you can take that block and you can kind of paste it right in the middle of your island. And then you can adjust the height as you need to be able to make it fit between the subtop and the, I'm gonna get rid of that actually. We're gonna actually probably bring these up a little bit now that I'm seeing that. But anyway, we're gonna make sure that this is touching the subtop like this. I'll bring these guys up too. So I'm gonna use a stretch command to do that. Then I think in the next video, we're gonna finish up this section view, and then we're gonna start doing our sweep command to be able to produce a 3D model off of this section view, as well as our paths that we've built up in the plan view up at the top. So I'm gonna save this here, and then we will carry on in the next video and keep moving forward.